You're watching Wisconsin Eye, an independent, nonprofit public affairs network, engaging the citizens of Wisconsin since 2007 through access to government proceedings and public policy events. To support programs like this, please consider a tax-deductible donation at wisi.org/donate or by texting WISI to 44321.
I thought that was another rep. So
if I move this over, is that going to be okay?
Yes, Nat.
You got it?
So this is who we have. Get a couple more breathes.
Oh, it's going to take a lot more than that.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I am State Representative Supreme Moore Omokunde. I represent the 17th Assembly District in the northwest side of the city of Milwaukee. I'm also a member of the Wisconsin Legislative Black Caucus. And today is a very auspicious day. It is the 18th day of Black History Month. Happy Black History Month, everyone. We're still celebrating. And also, Black History Month is about presentation. It's about the presentation of the work you've done the entire 11 months prior and the entire year prior, but in Black History Month, you present those works. And today, we are presenting something great. We want to say, first and foremost, happy 101st birthday to a great and incredible Wisconsinite, a giant in our history in the state. If you can call someone who's about 4'10", about a buck something soaking wet a giant, that's I think of her as a giant. We're talking about Vel Hortense Rogers Phillips, who everyone knows as Vel Phillips, and she was the first black woman to graduate from UW Law School. She was the first black woman to serve on the Milwaukee Common Council. She was the first black woman to be elected statewide. And now we are presenting her as the first black woman to have a special observance day in the state of Wisconsin in our schools. And she would be the first black person, the first black woman to have that in her honor if LRB 6089 is passed. And that's what we are presenting today as the Black Caucus for our presentation of Black History Month. And I will have several speakers who will speak after me. And first and foremost, I want to invite my state senator and my colleague who has been a champion on behalf of women's rights, poor people's rights, children's rights, et cetera, for years, not only in this body, but prior to. I want to invite State Senator LaTanya Johnson to the podium. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Supreme, for organizing this event and for inviting me here to speak today. I'm honored to be here to celebrate the life and legacy of a woman who forever changed the city of Milwaukee, this state, and the fight for justice around the country. The Honorable Vel Phillips wasn't just a leader. She was a force of nature. She refused to accept the limits placed on her as an African-American woman and as a woman in general. And she made sure that no one coming after her had to suffer those barriers as well. Milwaukee is the city that it is today in part due to Vel Phillips. She was the first black woman elected to the Common Council, the first black woman to graduate law school here in Wisconsin. She was the first black woman to serve as Secretary of State and the first black woman to serve as a judge in the state of Wisconsin, and the first black woman to have a statue of her likeness here on the state's capital. She fought for fair housing. She fought for voting rights, for economic opportunity, and for justice and equality. And she never backed down, no matter how hard the fight got. She wasn't just making history, she was paving a way for the rest of us. For Black women in Wisconsin who still face barriers, for young girls who need to see what's possible, and for every person who has ever been told to wait their turn. And that's what this bill is about, ensuring Vel Phillips' story is told for generations to come. Because making February 18th a special observance day in Wisconsin schools isn't just about remembering Vel Phillips. It's about teaching our kids what she stood for. It's about making sure her name, her fight, her passion, and her legacy lives on. Vel Phillips showed us what's possible and when we refuse to accept injustice. She taught us to demand change, to keep pushing forward, and to not limit ourselves or to limit the climb. And now it's our job to make sure her impact is never forgotten. Thank you all for being here. And next, I'll turn it over to Secretary of State, Sarah Godlewski.
Well, thank you, Senator Johnson, and I also want to thank Representative Moore and the entire Black Caucus for bringing us together this morning. I cannot think of a better way to celebrate Vel's 101st birthday than this observance day in public schools. So as Wisconsin's Secretary of State, I stand on Vel's shoulders. She was not only the first woman, but she was also the first person of color to be elected into this position. And as Senator Johnson noted earlier, she was also the first woman and person of color who was elected in her own way statewide. And she is a trailblazer. She had the courage and conviction, and Wisconsin is better because of Vel's leadership. You know, I'll never forget the first time that I learned about Vel Phillips. I was in high school in western Wisconsin, and we were doing the Wisconsin History Unit. And I was, learning about all of our great founders, and I remember thinking through this unit, I'm like, where's our, Harriet Tubman of Wisconsin? Where is our Abigail Adams of Wisconsin? Because seeing is believing. And I remember looking through my history book trying to find something, and eventually I came upon Vel's picture. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it says Wisconsin Secretary of State. Like, I need to learn everything I can about this woman. And what I learned about Vel is that Vel didn't just make history, Vel changed history. I was inspired by her persistence. Despite the barriers of racism and sexism, she said, you know what? I'm not going to give up. And what became an elected official in many ways that people said just simply were not possible at that time. I was inspired by her courage. Vel believed that everybody has a right to fair housing. And she stood up to these corporations and these insurance companies that were discriminating and implementing redlining, because she knew how dangerous it was to our communities. And I was just inspired by the core values of who she was. Vel believed that she was a voice for the voiceless, and she was going to be that person that ensured that no one, regardless of how much you made or who you were not going to be forgotten. And so, yet today, we know too many people in Wisconsin still don't know her name. And too many students, just like the one that I was, sitting in the classroom, flipping through my history books and not seeing that full picture of who actually shaped our state. And that's why this legislation matters so much, is that by establishing February 18th as Vel Phillips Day here in Wisconsin, we're ensuring that every student learns about her, not just as an afterthought, but as a fundamental part of our state history. Because when students learn about who Vel Phillips is, they're just not learning about history, they're actually believing in possibility. And they see a Wisconsin that is diverse, and they're learning about a leader who wasn't afraid to do what's right and stand up for what she believes in. And that value is a Wisconsin value that truly uplifts our motto to move our state forward. So I am really, again, want to thank the Black Caucus for putting together this important piece of legislation, and Wisconsin will be better because of it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary of State Godlewski. As she stated, Vel Phillips is someone who is in the fabric of Wisconsin history. And I just wanted to make a statement that it's really important that bills come from the people. They don't just germinate in this building and all of a sudden they become law, but that they emerge from those on the ground who are doing the actual work. And so with that, I want to invite a teacher, an instructor of our students who teaches social studies, Miss Mickey Maddox, who it was her long fight to try to find some way to get Vel Phillips recognized in the state of Wisconsin. She approached a colleague, the colleague approached me, and the Black Caucus said this is what we're going to do to honor our great ancestor, Vel Phillips. So at this time, I want to bring to the podium a great instructor, Miss Mickey Maddox.
Hello, my name is Mickey Maddox. I'm a high school English and Social Studies teacher at Necedah High School, which is kind of in the south central part of the state. We're a small rural school. And several years ago, I was given the task to do announcements for our school. And so I started going through the Wisconsin Public School Observation Days, putting them on my calendar. And as I started doing that, I really started looking at the names and the events that are celebrated on the calendar and noticed that there are quite a few gaps missing in what we have as part of Wisconsin today, in the fabric of Wisconsin today. So I contacted a few people I knew at the Department of Public Instruction, and also I'm sitting in front of my class and standing there and teaching about civic and civic engagement and working with them on their civic action projects, and said that I needed to be the person who modeled to my students what engagement actually looked like. So I started writing to my local senators and assembly members regarding public school observation days that I thought would be appropriate for the school, for the state to adopt. And Vel Phillips was definitely on the top of the list. And I appreciated her courage. I appreciated her civic action. And I knew that this was a person who needed to be recognized all over the state for her courage and for her willingness to stand up, as well as for her willingness to be the person who was going to be the first at so many things that she was the first at. So she was a really great model for the state of Wisconsin, and I felt the rest of the state would benefit, and our students would benefit by seeing that example and seeing themselves in that example, and being able to have the opportunity themselves to also be lifted by Vel's memory to do better things for the state of Wisconsin. So when I met Representative Andrenka at our social studies conference last year, she was the person I felt would be the person to help me move this forward, and I communicated with her, and the rest is history, a great history today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I also want to acknowledge the chair of the Wisconsin Legislative Black Caucus. Dora Drake is present here today as well. She's dipping out of committee to come be a part of this. And I also want to recognize Representatives Margaret Arney and Saquana Taylor, and also Senator Johnson that you heard from, members of the Wisconsin Legislative Black Caucus. At this time, we'll take any questions that anyone has about this resolution or any work that the Wisconsin Legislative Black Caucus is doing.
One question, like in this environment for publishing about DEI and that kind of stuff, do you think there's an openness to having something like this discussed when you send in the Senate?
Well, I think so. We already have the statute on South Hamilton. Vel Phillips has a street in the city of Milwaukee, and a great leader, Malcolm X, once said that history serves best our research. And so if you just look at the history of the state of Wisconsin, you look at who has shaped history in the state of Wisconsin, the city of Milwaukee, it's really a no-brainer to make sure that people can know about how we arrived at the point that we are now.
So you have an LRB. Is it just out for co-sponsorship right now? When do you plan to introduce it? And do you have members from the other side of the aisle on the resolution at this point?
Not yet. It's out for co-sponsorship. We started with the Black Caucus. We wanted to make sure that we were all in tune. However, we are sending out for co-sponsorship. And we look forward to having a bipartisan effort on this bill. And I think it's open. We're open to that.
I want to ask, I noticed the Black History Month resolution is on the calendar on the Assembly after some years of it going back and forth. So is that how that happened? How do you guys get that probably agreed to take it up this year?
Did you want to speak to that? Go ahead.
I can speak to that. So this year we again got bipartisan support for the Black History Month resolution, which again should be a no-brainer because Black history is American history, and we're simply honoring those that have made contributions to that. And so I think it is a matter of agreeance, honestly, when it comes to what it means to not only honor history, but also the support that it got on both sides of the aisle. And so we are hopeful of what tomorrow will bring on the Assembly floor, but still looking, to hopefully pass that with unanimous support.
What about in the Senate? You guys aren't in this month, obviously, but is maybe March target date?
That's the goal. So we have not heard that we'll be in session in the Senate. So obviously we're still going to be pushing for that, so it's passing the Senate chambers as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
So one of the things that Vel stood for was fair housing, and one of the bills that comes up the past two sessions but has yet to make any movement is the removal of restrictive covenants on house properties. Is that something that this caucus is working towards continuing to move forward in this next session?
Yes. Anyone else? No?
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having us. Thanks.
You have been watching a production of Wisconsin Eye, your unfiltered window into legislative deliberations and public policy programming, where our mission is to provide Wisconsinites an opportunity to access the legislative process and connect with conversations that inform our citizenry. Please consider supporting our mission, and thank you for watching. Wisconsin Eye, policy made public.